Hi, welcome to OZZIE'S. My name is Ozzie Jurock, and today I have the privilege and the pleasure to speak to Rick Hoogendoorn from Rictoria. He has an interesting journey of reinventing himself through various professions, and I'm really happy that he took the time to come over the pond and talk to us. Hi, Rick.
Hello, Ozzie. Great to see you.
So tell me a little bit about, you didn't start out in the real estate business, did you?
No, I actually, when I was a kid, I was captivated by Danny Gallivan doing all the broadcasting of the Montreal Canadiens games, and I wanted to be a broadcaster like him, so I ended up going to BCIT, took broadcast journalism, and my first profession was in the television industry. So I started out as a researcher and a sports reporter and that sort of thing. Eventually got into news. And then after I left that, I went to Barcelona for a little while.
Wow.
And taught English for a year and a half, and grew my hair long. And a funny story, I came back and landed in Toronto, and my uncle lived there, and I came to his door with my long hair, and without missing a beat, he took one look at me and he said, "I had no idea Franco killed all the barbers."
Well, that was the older generation and us with long hair.
Yeah.
Well, you took it too hard because you don't, excuse me for saying it, but so you don't seem to have much hair left.
No, that's gone as a result of doing large real estate projects. I've lost all my hair. Yeah.
Well, I don't have that much hair left either, Rick, so there you go.
It's overrated.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, they say that people with lesser hair are far more sexy than those that have the better hair. At least that's what I believe.
Well, I don't disagree.
So you went teaching in Barcelona. You were dreaming about acting there for a while. So how did you get into the real estate business?
Well, when I came back from Europe, I ended up getting into the financial planning business and was selling mutual funds and life insurance and doing all that financial planning stuff. And eventually, about 1998, 99, I guess, my wife and I, Sherry Krause, read the Rich Dad, Poor Dad book. And that really turned our heads around. And it was really about, the issue of leverage.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the main difference. Before that, it's funny, you think you know what you're talking about. I certainly don't in retrospect. I used to say to people, the long-term trend or rate of return for stocks was, say, 10, 12%, and the long-term trend for real estate as an asset class was 8 to 10%. Right. What would you rather have?
Right.
But of course, comparing those two as asset classes is ridiculous because it doesn't take into account the fact that you could put little or no money down on a property, and your rate of return can be infinite.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, you read the book, Tony Robbins just put out a book a couple of years ago on investing, and he missed that point altogether. Now, if his clients are all multimillionaires and they all pay cash for $100 million, and then yes, then it works. But if I buy a $100,000 house and put $20,000 down, and the house goes up by $20,000, I made 100% of my money.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no question. So that woke you up.
That woke us up. We had gone ahead and purchased a revenue property before that, but that sort of got the ball rolling, and we started buying real estate, mostly with friends and family as joint venture partners, for basically from about 1999 through to 2008, and went a bit crazy with that. I bought, for example, 3 houses in Saskatoon with Sherry's brothers. And that turned out to be a good thing. Of course, there's always hiccups. We bought one house on Elm Street.
Yeah.
Now, Elm Street is known as being a bit of a nightmare.
Yeah.
Right?
Nightmare.
Well, sure enough. So we bought this house on Elm Street, and within a week, the city came and clamped down on the fact that there was an illegal suite in the house. So somebody on the street had ratted on us as the new buyers owning property with an illegal suite. So of course we had to go in and get that all fixed up. Worse, or actually thankfully, in one way, upon fixing the suite up, we discovered there was a major problem with the foundation, which was not discernible prior to as part of the regular inspection.
So it was a latent defect.
So $20,000 for fixing up the suite, $20,000 for fixing up the foundation, and luckily we were in partnership so we could kind of share the load with that, but that was a nightmare.
Well, the thing is, we all have to go through it though, so you don't take it too easy. I mean, in retrospect, when you look at 10 deals, one perhaps goes, you have a tenant from hell, for instance,
totally,
or runs out with your fridge or whatever. But on balance, it's that question of leverage that is so key, that can create a life for somebody that with very little capital, actually, particularly if he has a partner like you do. So was that your first real estate investing opportunity then?
The first one that we did actually was happened in Victoria. Sherry had gotten into the habit of going to open houses as a social event with a friend of hers on the weekends. And they would just go to open houses and hang out, and then the next weekend they'd do it again. And this went on for months and months and months, until at one point she came across this property that she thought would be perfect for her parents. And so she came back to me and said, I think we should buy this place. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
And went ahead and purchased that. And they still live there today. And they're in their late 80s.
So she was right.
Yeah.
So, okay, so what was your biggest mistake then?
Well, I think there's two. There might be three. The first one was, my dad was an investor himself, and when I was in my late teens, early 20s, we were living in Vancouver, and he came to me and he said, if you manage the tenants and cut the grass and all that sort of stuff, I'll buy this house with you. It was kind of like in the Fraser view area of Vancouver.
Okay.
And we'll split the profits, right? And being the genius young person, I said, I don't feel like it.
You don't want to do it.
Yeah, I don't want to do that. So he went ahead, did that, and pocketed about $100,000 in a year.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right? Of which 50 would have been mine, right? Which would have been enough to buy a house.
And he never let you forget it either.
Well, So there was that one.
Yeah.
Another one was we had bought a pre-sale condo in Victoria, and it was a kind of a snazzy new development, environmentally friendly and all that sort of stuff. And we'd gone in with some partners, so we only had about a quarter share of this condo. It was quite expensive. And we didn't run the numbers for what would happen if we had to close. And we were intending to flip it, right? And that was very common at the time, and there weren't problems at the time, right? But we didn't run the numbers for what would happen if we had to keep it. Well, as fate would have it, we couldn't flip it. The market changed, and we had to keep it, and we were underwater on our portion alone.
Yeah.
At $500 a month negative cash flow.
That's painful.
Not only that, but then interest rates dropped. And of course, what they have at the bank is this wonderful thing of the greater of 3 months penalty or your interest. So the interest rate differential ended when we were trying to get out of it subsequently was $60,000. Well, I can't eat that.
No.
So we ended up having to keep that. It was a loss for years and years and years. Eventually managed to get it into kind of an Airbnb kind of short-term rental situation, which was okay and stemmed the problem a little bit, and sold it a few years ago. But that was easily the worst one, I think, from a small deal
It
perspective.
just goes to show that when you want to flip, you don't want to go long on your mortgage.
Well, and you got to run the numbers on both. Like, what happen if I'm trying to hold on to it? What happens if I have to sell it quickly? And if I'm going to sell it quickly, what happens if I have to hang on to it? And if those numbers don't work both ways, don't do the deal.
Right. You said there was a third?
Yeah. The first apartment deal that we did, we ended up building.
It's an apartment building.
Yes, a purpose-built rental building. We made some fairly major mistakes, 4 of them, that were, fairly large financial errors, that because we didn't know what we were doing.
Right.
And so, but we did backflips and somersaults and made it work so that we paid out our investors as we promised, on time and on budget and all that sort of stuff. But that was very stressful, and thus no hair.
But timing helped, right?
Yeah, we were very lucky.
Yeah.
We were very lucky because we were fully tenanted when we opened, within 13 days of opening. The value of the building was solid, and it's continued to run its course that way. But I'm not an optimistic guy. I tend to think that the longer the up goes, the closer I am to the cliff. So,
but the thing is, we can talk about mistakes and we can talk about wishful thinking, but in the end, it was all the actions we take. Because you took the actions, at the very least, you learned something for the future.
Yeah.
And and really, to me, that's the most important part. If I hadn't made all the mistakes in my life, I wouldn't have had all the fantastic deals that came after, because you went from that first apartment building into another one.
Yeah, and in the second one, none of those problems, because I knew what I was doing. By that time, I was able to avoid those 4 particular problems.
But the point is that you didn't see yourself as a developer for the longest time, no?
No, I don't have. I can personally tear down a house putting up a towel rack. Yeah. I'm banned from power tools in my household. I have no skill set along those lines. So, we were not thinking that we would build a single family home, let alone an apartment building. Right. But, as fate would have it, we got connected with a builder who basically helped us along and has helped us, create a portfolio of buildings.
But the great thing is you found a way to find investors. You were very careful with those investors. You wanted them to do well, and they know that, right? Yeah. And then you have a good builder. I mean, you put the thing together. That's really what a developer does, and that's where the developer either sleeps or doesn't sleep.
Yeah, and I don't sleep. Primarily because I'm always thinking about what could go awry. Now, the more time goes on, some of these things can be put to bed. Like, am I concerned that I'm going to get tenants for my building? Not really. I kind of have been past that. But initially, I thought I wasn't going to get any tenants for the building. Do I think the building's going to fall over? I did before. Now I don't think the building's going to fall over. So
yeah. Well, so how have you managed to do most of your real estate deals then?
So on the apartment buildings, how that started was Sherry and I had basically sat down at the beginning of the year, about January, first week of January kind of thing, and articulated what we needed to have in terms of passive income to retire. We had a number, and within a week, Sherry had actually gone to this builder who she had been working with to find lots to build on, and said, we'd like to own an apartment building one day. Can we just talk to you about it? And it was more just an exploratory conversation that we had in mind. But Margaret, the builder, came back to us and said, well, why don't I just build you one? And we said, okay. And then I started to worry. Yeah. And had to work through a bunch of my, fear thoughts and that sort of thing that were keeping me from, going out asking people for money and all that kind of thing.
But the one thing is, you did one, then you feel like looking at another one.
Yeah.
When I bought my first house on a much smaller scale, I think my first house was $13,400. But I thought I had arrived. I wrote my parents, I own my house in 25 years, I pay it off. But the moment I was in it, I was looking, oh, could I buy another house? Right?
Yeah.
With you, it was an apartment building, and then let's have another apartment building. Is there any big turning points in your investing history that you can look back on?
I think the rich dad poor dad
Yeah.
thing was one. The doing the first apartment building was another, and I think that kind of relates to what you're talking about. Is that when you've done something, you expand your comfort zone.
Right.
And anything that kind of fits within that comfort zone fits within the comfort zone. I mean, I'm not uncomfortable building apartment buildings now, which sounds bizarre.
Particularly when
But
5 years ago you were uncomfortable.
yeah, very uncomfortable. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
So those kind of things, once you do that, because before you do something, your mind is just full of all the negative stuff that you can imagine.
Yeah.
You know, all the things that you can imagine are going to go wrong, and how you're going to lose money or look stupid or whatever it happens to be. But once I've done it, like I'm now, I don't even bat an eye at talking to somebody about, hey, by the way, you know, like we're building another apartment building.
Yeah. And I mean, how many units are those buildings?
First one was 20. Actually, this is an interesting story. The first opportunity that we had to build an apartment building was 60 units.
Yeah.
And we passed on that because it freaked us out.
60?
You know,
Wow.
60, oh my God, you know, like I can't even imagine. How much money do we have to raise? So then an opportunity came to build 20,
Yeah.
and
You
because
feel
the
confident.
mind
Yeah.
works the way it does, I went, 20?
Yeah. You can
Piece
do
of
that.
cake.
Yeah.
You know, so that kind of mental game
That
really
is
helped
so
us.
true. I mean, and even on a smaller scale, we have in our groups, we have people that buy a house, they maybe buy a duplex, and then they're aiming for a fourplex. And I say, you know, actually a 10plex is just as easy to manage as a fourplex, perhaps even easier, right? And one of our members actually started buying 40 and 50 units. Now she only wants to buy 100 units and more, right? You get into that comfort zone, and then you realize, hey, it's, you know, if you got the numbers right, you got the right people, you know, then it works.
This is another thing that I think was a turning point, and honestly, this is this, you know, being a member of the Real Estate Action Group, and rubbing shoulders with other people who are doing things at that level. And so what happens is you start to realize that what you want to do is not an impossible human achievement.
Right.
I mean, if you look around on the planet, every single building that you see was conceptualized,
By somebody.
financed, and built by somebody.
Yeah. Well, the Chinese have been investing in real estate for 2,000 years and have done well. So what is it that you think people don't invest in real estate more? What reason would it be?
In my experience, a lot of the people that I know who have started out investing and then stopped had their first experience as a landlord having a tenant in their basement.
Yeah.
And what happens uniquely when you have a tenant in your basement is you are living with your tenants 24/7.
That's right.
And that is so different than having the tenant live across town.
Yeah.
I don't have to hear them coming in. I don't have to listen to their music. I don't have to, you know, whatever it happened, get embroiled in whatever drama happens to be going on.
Yeah.
And so I think that experience for a lot of people makes them go, I want nothing to do with being a landlord, which is very different than I think being a landlord when they're not underfoot.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's true. It's funny. I mean, a good friend of mine has an office in his house, and he feels threatened by his own family. He says, every time I get in the basement, there's always, George, you want to pick me up some milk when you go out later? So he boarded up the door from the main floor to the basement, and then leaves the front door in the morning, walks around the house, and goes in the basement. So, but it's not the same thing, of course. But you're right. We make these experiences. It doesn't even have to be a tenant from hell. It's just the constant somebody being on top of you. Right?
Yeah.
So that's that
We-
makes it.
We had a tenant who we inherited in one of the houses that we bought, and her boyfriend would get off work at Kentucky Fried Chicken or wherever he was working at like 1 o'clock in the morning. And he had one of those big mufflers, you know, the mufflers that don't muffle.
Yeah.
And he would just pull up in front of the house at 1 o'clock in the morning, sounding like a Cessna airplane.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing that happens, you know, when you're living above the tenants. So.
Well, it's and you know that I've always had a great appreciation for you and your straightforwardness. So now, not only that, are you an accomplished realtor, builder, developer, you're also an author. And I think that story on that first book that you wrote, What is Stopping You, and then you followed it up, 18 Holes to Your Goals. That first book took you a while to write.
Yeah, I had been trying to write books probably, well, since I was in my early 20s. The first book that I wanted to write was called The Bachelor's Guide to Success. And I actually had got a cartoonist to draw pictures of like, you know, socks disappearing from the laundry and stuff like that. And I was writing that book on a Commodore 64. You remember the Commodore 64?
Sure.
And that computer, I don't know if you remember using it, but in order to tab, you'd have to go Control-Alt-7-J9 or something, and then boop, it would go over. It was a tedious process, and somehow I went Control-Alt-799 or something one day and deleted the entire book. So that was my first experience writing a book, and then I started a number of other ones, and they didn't go anywhere. I wrote a book in Spain called Eternal Magic, which was kind of a kid's book, and I got 125 pages into that and stopped. And then I had this idea for a golf book where you take the basic premise of golf and apply it to success. So you have a target, you have a limited number of steps to reach the target. You know where you're going after you hit that short-term target to the next one.
Which is a great concept.
Yeah. And I had reams and reams of research and ideas and writings, but I never got it done. And finally one day, I just said to myself, what is going on? How is it possible that I can want to do something and not do it? Like there must be some explanation for why I'm stuck.
Yeah.
And I just put that question out into the universe kind of thing and hung out with it. And all of a sudden the answer came back, it's like, why am I not writing books? Was, well, you don't want to write books. And I kind of it stunned me when I first had that occur to me. And then I took out a piece of paper and I wrote down a bunch of reasons why I didn't want to write books. I didn't want to be criticized. I didn't want to, have it be a waste of time. I didn't want to be rejected by publishers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized it's not that I wanted to write books. It's not that I didn't want to. It's that I both wanted to and didn't. And it was like pushing the gas and the brake pedal down on the car at the same time.
You go for a little bit and you stop.
And you just spin your wheels.
Yeah.
So I had prior to that, I had kind of discovered this thing called the work of Byron Katie, which is a way of questioning your story. And so what I did was I took all those reasons why I didn't want to write books to that process, asked, is it true? Can I absolutely know it's true? What happens when I believe this thought? I'm going to be criticized. Who would I be without it? And then turned all those thoughts around, and it was like the brake pedal came off.
Right.
And in about 2 or 3 days, I wrote the rough draft of What is Stopping You, which is basically the story of what I just told you.
But actually also at the time, if I remember right, there was an outside influence that gave you a purpose, right? You were trying to raise money for a good cause and a golf tournament.
Oh, so that was related to the 18 Holes to Your Goals book. Okay. So subsequently, that writing that book happened about a year later, kind of thing.
But you wrote it very fast.
What was helpful again was that I had a purpose or somebody for whom I was doing it.
Right.
And so I had dedicated the proceeds of that sale of that book to a charity that I was on the board of.
But that's so interesting, that when I look at my life, I never had a purpose that was outside my regular kind of thing, maybe raising money for a good cause, or I somehow got into action right away. This push-pull you're talking about wasn't there. It got away because the overall purpose was, whatever I was tying it to. So that's important. But what I liked about that particular book is when you ask yourself the question, I want to do something, and then turn it around and say, I don't want to do something. I was at your opening, and you talked about your book, and it's a neat little book. I read it on the ferry, and I thought to myself, I want to lose weight. Let me turn that around. And I said, I don't want to lose weight. And that was an epiphany. I really don't want to lose weight. I enjoy myself. I don't think I'm overweight at all. Well, I'm not obese, right? But I'm not even pleasingly plump. I'm below that. I'm actually quite good. I'm no longer going to beat myself up. I should lose weight. And so if everybody asks themselves the question, whatever it is, you say, I can't do that, I don't want to do this, or I want to do that, ask yourself. The old story we used to teach is, when you write down what you want to buy in real estate, ask yourself why you want to buy it. It's not what real estate you want to buy, it's why do you want to buy it? And the answer to why is really the true answer, right? We do sometimes things because we think it's expected of us, or we ought to do this, right? So that little book rattles your cage. I recommend it to everybody. What is Stopping You by Rick Hoogendoorn. Where can they get it?
Right now, as a gift from me, as I hand it to you when I see you.
Okay. And where do they see you?
And I have it on my list of things to do. I must have a reason why I don't want to do this, which is to make a free PDF out of it and just make it available to everybody.
Yeah, or make it a talking book. Yeah. It's the new world.
Yeah.
Well, look, you've won a lot of awards. I know you were the Real Estate Action Group Joint Venture of the Year Award, both in 2015 and in 2017. But it started early at the Athlone Boarding School. You were the most helpful junior boarder. What is that?
My parents were divorced when I was 7, I guess. So I was shipped off to boarding school for about a year and a half. Actually, it would have been longer, but the school closed down. It used to be over by the Boulevard in 49th.
Okay.
And then it was kind of like other than St. George's, it was the other all-boys school in Vancouver at the time. And so I don't know, I used to help the littler kids with their, making their beds and stuff, I guess.
Wow, it got you an award.
Yeah.
I mean, now you're not only a developer, but you're also in the top 2% of realtors with Royal LePage in Canada. So, I mean, how do you find time to relax? And
I am obsessive about soccer, so that's what I do. Is I played 2 games of soccer yesterday. I'm president of the over 40s league in Victoria. There's 32 men over 40, over 55, over 48 and over 55, and our oldest player is 79.
Wow.
Yeah,
well, that's good.
Awesome.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Well, I'm heading to the ski hill, and I'm skiing with somebody that's 80, and I have his picture on my fridge. I want to be skiing like him, and he skis better than me, right? So if you do something on a regular basis, that's fun.
Yeah.
And exercise, it really works well, because you sure as heck look very fat. Look, you're also
fat or fit?
Fat.
Hey, make sure you enunciate that correctly, Ozzie.
Fit.
Freudian slip. It sounded fat to me.
No,
you look very fat.
Actually, you do look like you lost weight.
I have.
For the listeners to know that he looks like he lost weight. It was a Freudian slip. You also had a Best Human Interest News Story in 1985, and you were with the Canadian Radio and Television News Directors Association. So you had your share of being part of books and awards, and of course you were in my book Real Estate Action 2.0, where you had a great story about to move or not to move. But what people don't know about you is that when you send a slideshow that normal people send 10 slides for 3 minutes, you send, what was the record again?
I don't know, 186 or something like that.
And I'm the complainer. I said, come on, you can't do that many slides in 3 minutes, but you can.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know even where that started. Well, it probably started with you saying you can't do that many, and I went, oh yeah.
But the one thing that you also are not just an all-around nice guy, a great success as a builder, developer, as I mentioned, and as a realtor. I mean, you and Sherry are doing such a great job with any clients that come to Victoria and want to buy real estate. But you also have talents that other people just admire you for. I mean, I know that. Did you bring Arnold with you today?
No. Ozzie, it's that osmosis that we have between each other. This is so fantastic. I've been sitting here, looking out on the broad street here. It's nice panoply of Christmas lights and everything. It's fantastic. And it's always good to chat with you.
Well, Arnold, I'm really privileged and honored to have you here. Is there any other friends that you have with you from Hollywood?
The most important thing talking about real estate is to make sure that every house you buy has a Christopher Walken closet.
Well, that is a great rendition of just a small sampling of the talent that you have. It's funny how you can take somebody else and then put words in their mouth, and you in a very short period of time you get the essence of that person out.
I used to watch the Rich Little Show back in the 70s, and he would do Richard Nixon and all these guys, and so I started mimicking him. And apparently, according to guys that do a lot of impressions, it's easier to mimic somebody who's doing the mimicking than it is to actually mimic the person themselves.
Oh, interesting.
Because they tend to exacerbate, the certain characteristics. So for example, with Arnold, it's this, and
it's funny, yeah.
And that was the first
trademark.
That was the first thing I learned was just that. And then after a while, I started to get the cadence of it, and then you can talk like they do, and sometimes they're just micro impressions where you only have a line or two. But there's others where I can literally talk like that person. I got not assigned, but I had the opportunity to be an MC for an awards dinner one year, and it had a theme of James Bond, and I had no idea. I didn't do any of the James Bond actors and so on, so I would drive around in my car and I would read all the street signs as if they were being read by Sean Connery. And I can remember reading this one sign that when I'd pass it, in my regular travels, it was a place called Fitness World. And I would just say this over and over again, and eventually I got Fitness World. It's I'm going to take a course at Fitness World. And it's more like the S is SH, and the world is more like Herald. So it's Fitness World. And now, of course, I can talk like Arnold. I can't talk like Arnold.
Now that was making an impression of an impression.
Right.
Well, now you're always a lot of fun to be with, but I can't let you go without you. What advice would you give to somebody just starting out as a real estate investor?
Oh, okay. I think that the most important thing that kept me, if we hearken back to what I said earlier, when I was in my early 20s and I had this opportunity with my dad, and quite frankly, it was pride in part that got in the way, right? That I just was, no, that's not the way I start out doing this. And a lot of people that I know who want to get into real estate have pride that keeps them from talking to their own family about, hey, if I found a good deal, is it possible that you might be interested in investing or partaking in that in some way? And it's a simple question. And I think that would be one of the first things, is to don't be afraid to ask, because you never know what the person is going to say. They might say no, they might say yes. And I can remember putting in an offer on a property, and this has happened to me 3 times, Ozzie, in my life, where I have phoned somebody up as the first person I was calling about getting money, and they said yes.
There you go.
The first person.
In fact, right now, money is plentiful. I mean, I remember times where there just was no money. But today, I mean, a dentist, a lawyer, or any professional has $1 million, $2 million in the bank. They're getting 1%. They're not pleased with it, and they'd probably be happy to earn 5 or 6% or more in a joint venture where they didn't have to do the work.
Yeah.
You, as maybe a young guy, young gal, could do the work, and together you can create a beautiful outcome, because it's where money has no time, and where the person has the time has no money. It's a perfect match.
I think the other thing that I would advise people is to take a long view of your own education. A lot of people will be in their profession and then stop learning. Or they'll be real estate investing in one property and then stop learning. Like, there's no reason to ever stop learning and reading and figuring new things out and finding ways to reduce your risk or increase your return or whatever. It costs you nothing to talk to somebody and get their advice, for example.
100%. I could not agree with you more. It's not just about understanding something at a certain point. It's personal growth, growing into your own future best through learning something new. Rick, it's been a wonderful pleasure to have you here. I want to thank you. I'm Ozzie Jurock with Rick Hoogendoorn. You can catch us at OZZIE'S.ca for other podcasts that we've done. Thanks for taking the time to listen, and give us some feedback. Live life large.